This episode is brought to you by the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook, the first beautifully designed, fully customizable paper charting workbook designed with you in mind. With 3 years worth of charting pages, the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook has you covered. If you've been looking for a solid alternative to charting apps, you'll love this charting workbook. The Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook is available in both Fahrenheit and Celsius editions, and it's available in spiral-bound, paperback, and ebook versions. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/workbook to order your copy today. That's fertilityfriday.com/workbook. You are officially invited. Yes, you're invited to join us in Fertility Awareness Mastery. This is my 10-week program designed to help you gain confidence using fertility awareness. Whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy or looking to optimize your cycles for conception, we have a spot for you. We start on October 1st. Are you ready to jump in? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to reserve your spot today. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 274. Welcome to the 274th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. As always, I'm excited to share today's episode with you. Today, I decided to bring you a special bonus episode to share some exciting news. Today is officially the day that the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook launches. And if you're not familiar, or if this is totally new, or if this wasn't even on your radar, the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook is actually a paper charting book that I've created to support you in your fertility awareness journey and to give you an option for those of you who love to chart on paper. And so I said over the years that that's how I started charting back in the day before we had charting apps and all the really cool options that we have nowadays. But I know through my client work that many of you still love charting on paper. So even to my surprise, because I would have thought, okay, we have all these apps, we've all moved on to technology, but time and time again, I'm reminded in my client work of how many of you love charting on paper. And so because of that, I've created the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook. And in today's episode, I am going to be talking about, what's the benefit of paper charting compared to charting with apps and all those types of things. And I'm also going to give you some insider details on the new charting workbook. So it is live. So if you want to, jump on your phone and check it out, you can head over to thefifthvitalsignbook.com/charting workbook. And you'll see two options. You'll see the Celsius option and the Fahrenheit option. So both options are available. So again, that's thefifthvitalsignbook.com/charting workbook. And before we jump into today's episode, a quick reminder that registration is open for Fertility Awareness Mastery. That is my 10-week live fertility awareness group coaching program where we dive deep into fertility awareness, whether you are at the beginning of your charting journey and wanting support, learning the rules, and gaining that confidence to really use fertility awareness to successfully avoid pregnancy until you're ready, or whether you're actively trying to conceive and you are wanting to learn more about your cycles and if there's anything that could support you in improving your chances for conception. So wherever you are in your journey, or if you're planning to conceive at some point in the future and you're just wanting to prepare your body ahead of time, we have a spot for you. If you're listening to this in real time, early bird pricing actually closes on the 30th of August. So you still have a few more days to sign up at the early bird rate. And so make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program for details and to sign up today. So that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. Now, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode and talk all about the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook. I'm super excited to be here with you today and to be talking all about the charting workbook. I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about the history behind the charting workbook because there's actually history behind it, which is really fun. For those of you, I know some of my friends listen to the show I actually just came back from a fantastic vacation. I went home to visit friends and family. And I always say that it's so strange to me when my friends tell me they listened to the episode. One of my girlfriends told me that she's like, it's like I'm having a conversation and I want to say something, but it's just you talking and I can't jump in and say anything. And I thought it was really cute and also really funny. But for those, if any of you are listening who actually know me personally, I created a charting workbook back in my early 20s. And many of my, girlfriends, my besties from back then actually still own them. The charting workbook goes way, way back. When I first started charting my cycles, so many of you have heard my story. I was in my late teens, actually. I was either 18 or 19. It's hard to remember so far back then. First year of university, discovered charting, started charting my cycles. And as I mentioned at the top of the episode, there were no charting apps. Like we're talking year 2000, way back when. I didn't even own my first cell phone, I'm pretty sure, until my first year of university, like towards the end. So I'm dating myself, and some of you might be horrified, but that's what it is. And so when I started charting, one of the things that I did kind of right off the bat was go on Microsoft Excel and create a spreadsheet for myself that very much mirrored the spreadsheet that you would see in taking charge of your fertility. So just a page with, lots of lines, and just kind of looking at those basic charting features. And so, I would just print them off and I would just kind of have them loosely. And, one of my friends and colleagues and mentors decided to throw her charts into a book. So she kind of bound them up. And I thought, wow, that's such a great idea. And so I decided to make my own. So the first iteration of the charting workbook that you'll see if you search for it and kind of take a look, it actually happened many, many years ago. And so back then, as a early 20s girl, I had a lot less resources available to me, but I still made it happen. So I went to my local print shop. I was, printing off all of these pages, binding them with a spiral bound situation there. And, I think all in all, probably only 30 or 40 of the books ever got made. And so that's just, I thought would be some fun trivia for all of you to kind of see that this was something that started a long time ago. But back then, it was really expensive to print. And so there was no ability for me to kind of do it on a larger scale and to really continue with it. It was really a passion project. And I used to make the covers by hand with scrapbooking materials and things like that. So they looked really cute, but it just was not something that was feasible, and certainly not something I could have produced for the masses. So over the years, though, that always stuck with me because I continued to use my charting books, and I still have them, the many that I've used over the years. Over the years, I have kind of switched. I did switch at one point to charting apps, and I used those for a little while, and I tried different apps, but, I'm just a paper charting girl at heart. So eventually I've scrapped the charting apps and back to paper charting. So what's interesting though, is in my client work, all of my clients have the option to either chart with an app or to chart with paper. So I always provide my clients with the paper charting option. And it always surprised me that how many of my clients would actually print, like they would take the paper chart that I provided, print it off, and then, in our sessions, maybe just send a picture. So use your cell phone to take a picture so that we could go over it together. But it always surprised me because there's always a percentage of my clients who would use the paper charts. So what's fascinating about having this history of charting books and also charting over all of these years and then working with clients using charting pages in my practice, what's interesting about that is that all of that information went into the creation of the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook. And so I know, everyone has different preferences. And so I recognize that there's no way to satisfy every single woman on earth. And I totally recognize that. So certain calls had to be made. But there was a few things that were really important to me, especially over the years. So one is having enough space to write down your details, having the space to kind of write in what you want day to day. So that the chart is designed with 8 sections, 8 blank spaces to allow you to customize and write whatever you want. So there's certain defined categories, like cervical position and temperature and cervical mucus. So there's certain categories that have to be there. But beyond that, I wanted to include a lot of space and options for you to kind of write in what you want. And the chart itself is big enough for you to write how you want. It is open enough in the sense, like open kind of concept, although it's not a living room. I felt that word was appropriate. But the way that I designed it is it can be used with multiple methods of charting. So whether you're charting with taking charge of your fertility, or whether you're using the Justice method or Billings, or if you're using the Cretan method, or, whatever the case is, or if you're just kind of figuring it out and not really using a particular method, the book is designed in a way that you can actually just do whatever you need to do. And so that was something that was really important to me. And also having a spot to kind of jot down things from day to day, because if I know anything from working with clients and also myself, is that, there's always different things going on. So there's certain things that you're going to want to monitor and track. And so those can kind of go on the chart. But if certain events happen day to day, you always want to have a place to write all that stuff down. And so having that all accessible and ready for you was really important to me. So we'll talk more about the details of what's actually on the charts in a bit, but I thought it would be fun to start with a bit of the history and where some of those ideas came from, and also all the different aspects and that kind of factored into the book. And so when I think about who the book is for, it's for a really specific subset of women. And really, it's those of us who are really passionate about charting, who are already charting our cycles or are planning to chart our cycles or are somewhere on that journey, and who maybe for whatever reason just like writing stuff down. So I know some of, if you're anything like me, I've always had a journal. What I've written and what I write in my journal has changed over the years, but I've always had a journal and a place to write down my thoughts. And so I might organize them in a different way than I did when I was a little girl, but I always have something going, some place where I can write my thoughts or plan my day or, write my goals or whatever it is. And I've always had a paper chart. I've always had a place to put for my cycles. And so because I've been charting for so long, because I've kind of tried different things over the years, one of the things that I found is that when I did switch to charting apps, because I wasn't committed in the sense of, I used one app for like a year and a half, maybe 2, and then I switched to a different app, and then I used that app for maybe a year and a bit. And then I switched back to paper. So I kind of like moved around a little bit. But when I look back, the years that I use the charting apps, those are years that I don't necessarily have the paper record. When I think about what some of the advantages of paper charting are, and also the type of personality that would appreciate paper charts, it's those of us who really like the idea of being able to look back on our charting over the years and our cycles and kind of see how they've changed and look at how your cycles were at different seasons of your life. Now, not all of us have these types of options. If you've just discovered charting and you're in your mid 40s, like you're not going to be able to look back at your charts in your 20s, and that's totally fine. But even if you have charts for a year or 2 or 6 months even, you can really start to see just what's happening throughout. But then for those of you who are listening, who are in your 20s and 30s, who are planning to chart for the long haul, then having a book where you can actually look back. And, for those of you who are super committed and end up, charting and then, collecting books over the years and have the ability to look back. I've heard comments from just women over the years who have charted and who have found health practitioners who are super interested in their charts, and to have that type of data over the years in a written place that's easily accessible and easily able, you're able to understand it, you're able to see it, you're able to interact with it. That's really invaluable. So I feel like there's a certain type of, certain kind of group of us who really appreciate having that type of information and to interact with it in that way. And so, that's for you, that's who I had in mind when I created this book, because there's something really neat about it. And so I just wanted to go through a couple of advantages of paper charting. There's obviously disadvantages as well, and that's why it's not for everybody. So some of you know already that you're not going to chart on paper. and there's no appeal there for you because it's just way too convenient to chart in your phone. And that's totally fine, because there are some of you who just are in love with the idea of charting on paper, like I am, because it just fits better. I always say I like having the chart on my nightstand. It's a physical reminder for me to chart. And I like being able to look at the actual physical charts and to be able to go through and, year after year, be able to see them and interact with them. A few advantages that I've specifically found over the years for both myself and my clients is that when you chart on paper, you really get to learn the method. There's no shortcuts, and there's no, you may still have times when you're a little bit confused by what you're seeing, but you don't have the additional confusion of an app that's filling in information for you and then you having to decipher that. So what I find with charting apps, especially at the very beginning stages when you're learning, if you're using an app that completes information, that fills in information, and I mean any information, even if the information that it fills in is supposed to be helpful. When you have an app that fills in information for you and adds in things and tells you, predicts ovulation or predicts your period or adds in numbers or letters or whatever the case is, but in any case, it's not you writing stuff down and there's certain automatic things that kind of pop up. That just adds confusion. I found it very consistently that charting apps that do that add confusion. And it adds confusion because, especially when you're first learning and you haven't yet grasped all the concepts, or you're not necessarily comfortable with the rules, having something that adds in information causes you to question your own observations. So at the very beginning of your charting journey, you're still figuring it out. So understandably, when you see something that doesn't match what you think you should, if you see mucus on a day that you don't think you should, if your temperature is high on a day that you don't think it should be, or whatever the case is, you're already kind of like, ooh, this is different. How do I manage this? But when you also have an app filling in information, telling you should ovulate on this day, or you should have your period on this day, or whatever information it's filling in, it just adds an additional layer of confusion. And it can also cause you to become more reliant on it. So you can kind of become reliant on that estimation of this and that, and it can prevent you from really just trusting what's happening without that additional information. However, when you chart on paper, there's just you and the paper. So it's you and your paper, your pencil. A lot of my clients use pencil crayons to fill in different colors for their mucus and their dry days and those types of things. So you're able to interact with it, but there's no one else filling in the data. So when you're learning the rules, it's like you either know them or you don't. It's like when I was in university and there was, short answer versus long answer or essays. If you have a question and just a blank spot, it's either you know your stuff or you don't. Whereas when you have the multiple choice, even if you don't know, you might get it right. That's always been my preference, especially even as a teacher when I'm teaching women to chart. But it's not about me and my preference when I'm working with someone. So whatever is clever works. But just as a side note, it is easier even for me when I'm working with someone who just is writing it down, because then you can see it's either correct or not. It's either it makes sense or it doesn't. And then right away if there's something you don't understand, and it just kind of helps. So that's just one advantage, that you actually end up learning the method. Because when you don't have something filling in the data for you, it forces you to step up and learn how to interpret the data, how to write it in, where to put your cover line, how to identify ovulation, how to identify when you have your 3 temperatures that are higher than the previous, how to identify your peak day, like all of the kind of fertility awareness terminology, all of the rules, all the specifics around charting and figuring out, okay, when does my fertile window start? When does it end? How do I know that I've ovulated? How do I confirm it with my temperature, my cervical mucus? Where does cervical position fit into all of this? So when you're charting on paper, you just have to figure it out. And it can feel like a lot in the first cycle or two, but once you get the first 1 or 2 cycles under your belt, then it becomes a lot easier. So another advantage that I wanted to mention, and so this, this can also apply to certain charting apps. So I don't want to make it seem like this is only applicable to paper charting. But one of the advantages that I found with paper charts is that you can really customize your charts and write in whatever you want and however you want to write it in. So with charting apps, there's often preset things, right? There's preset categories or preset ways that things are described. So cervical mucus, for example, many charting apps have a preset way that it is described where you have to select one of the options that they've provided, right? So classic example, is it sticky, creamy, or egg white? Well, if you use a charting modality that doesn't stick to that sticky, creamy, egg white, concept, then you are limited by the categories that are presented to you. Whereas when you're charting on paper, you can do whatever you want. So if you wanted to write it in differently, if you wanted to use a different color, if you wanted to just create your own situation, whatever that looks like, you can do it. And also if you wanted to add in an extra note or something like that. So if you saw something and you were like, yeah, it was like this, but it was also this color, or, ooh, it was a little bit, gummy that day, or this seemed normal, but it was a little bit stickier than usual, whatever. You can write that in a paper chart, and you can make a notation and all of those types of things a bit easier. So I don't want to knock charting apps because, of course, many of the charting apps allow you endless categories. You can actually really customize and go in and write 50 different things if you want. And also there's typically a comment section that allows you to customize it. So I'm not saying it's like one or the other, but just kind of in a different way. So for example, for me, one of the things I've always done on a paper chart is draw cervical position. I just draw it. So if it's, open or closed or high or low or whatever the case, I'll draw a circle and maybe I fill in the circle, or maybe the circle is just like an O, or I can draw it higher in the box or lower in the box or in the middle, depending on what's happening. And I can just write in whatever I want. So if I'm paying attention to my chocolate consumption one cycle, or if I'm paying attention to my breast tenderness or something like that. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do that on a charting app, because you can. I'm just saying that sometimes it's nice to be able to draw stuff. So if you're a kind of a visual person or like an artsy person and you like drawing things, or you like presenting your information in a certain way, you just have a bit more freedom. So I suppose that's the advantage there. And I already touched on one of the third advantage I was going to mention, which is that you really get this record of your cycles, this physical record that you can keep over time. And it's kind of nice. So for anyone who journals, and then you have journals over the years and you kind of look back and look at the different experiences you've had and kind of see your growth as a person, or whatever the case is. If you're the type of person who does that anyways, then a charting book where you're actually charting can be really, really helpful. And of course, for those of you who do chart on paper, I know a lot of my clients will print off the charts, but eventually you kind of, you might get a binder or something like that. But we kind of want something nice and cute and put together for us, a place for us to put our information in. And so I know for me, I really fell in love with that idea of a charting book a long, long time ago. And even before I had finalized the charting workbook, I had created, I just ran off a bunch of charts and printed them off at the local Staples. So for me, having paper charting, you always just want a place to put your data and a nice place to collect everything so you can keep it together. It's even just more practical. Now, of course, there are some disadvantages to paper charting. I mean, you have this physical book, and if you're traveling or something like that and you're wanting to, continue what you're doing, you may have to take it with you. That can add a little bit of extra stuff. I know for a lot of us, it may not be convenient, if you have to have this physical thing with you. For many of us, having the flexibility and the ability just to throw it into your phone, since most of us have phones and many of us are on them, frequently throughout the day. Anyways, I get that for many of us, the phone is more convenient. So it certainly can have its drawbacks. But again, for the women who love paper charting, it's just like anything else, it's just a nice thing to have and thing to do, and a great way to keep those records. And also, if you are in a relationship with a partner who wants to be involved, or at least wants to kind of have the ability to see what's going on. I know for many of my clients who are in that situation, many of them have their chart accessible. So some of them have put it on a wall somewhere, maybe in their closet or something like that, or they'll have it laid out besides, in their night table or something like that, so that their partners can actually see their charts and see where they are in their cycle. So that's something I'm sure you could do with your app in a certain way, depending on the app and the sharing features, but it's a little bit different when you have the paper accessible just right there. So now you know what I had in mind when I was creating the charting workbook, and who I had in mind, and what I kind of thought of, what my vision was for it. And essentially my vision was to have a beautiful charting book that was functional, that would allow you to have charts for years at a time. So enough, for me, that's a thing. I don't want to just have a charting book that has just a couple of charts, or just enough for a year or something like that. So with the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook, there's actually 36 charts. I mean, I know that not everyone's cycles are perfectly aligned to a year, but again, when you're making a book designed in this way, you kind of just have to make a call. So I designed the workbook with 36 charts, enough for 3 years worth of charting. So that's what felt good to me. Felt like more would be kind of being presumptuous. 3 years is actually kind of a long time. And I felt like 3 years is a good amount of time. So when you get the charting workbook, you know that you're going to have it for a good amount of time. And it allows you to really get into charting and to kind of get into your likes and dislikes, but not so long that it's unrealistic. Many of us are, doing whatever we're doing. We're planning our families or at different stages of our life. So I felt like if just 3 years felt right. So there's a couple other features. For those of you who've read the Fifth Vital Sign, you'll know that in the Fifth Vital Sign, I talked a lot about, obviously, fertility awareness charting, cervical mucus observations, and it really delved into charting your signs and figuring out how it aligns to your health. And so, of course, I didn't want to just regurgitate exactly what I said, but what I included in the charting workbook was still details for each main fertile sign. So there's a section on cervical mucus, there's a section on basal body temperature, and there's a section on cervical position charting. And I took a different approach with the charting workbook. I actually reached out to the Fertility Friday Facebook community. I'm not sure if those of you who are in there noticed, but I reached out on a couple of occasions and I just asked, what are some of your top questions, your most pressing questions about cervical mucus, cervical position, basal body temperature? And I have in my mind some of the most common questions that I get from my clients on a regular basis. So I combined, some of those most common questions that I get with the actual questions that came up kind of over and over again within the group and things that I've seen. And that's how I organized the section. So I have some details, some information about the main fertile signs, plus some of the most common questions where I just go through and answer them, just kind of like, here's a question, and just kind of go through. And so the feedback that I've had from my early reviewers. So thank you to all of my early reviewers. So for those of you who are on my email list, you'll know that I reached out to you to ask you if you actually wanted to read an advanced ebook copy of the book before it came out. So I just want to say a special thank you to all of you who jumped on the advanced reader list and, read through the book I really appreciate it and provided such great feedback. It was really, really awesome to get that insight into how the book was received and what you thought of the charts and what you thought could be improved or what you thought was good or all of those types of things. So thank you to all of you. But some of the feedback that I received from my early reviewers was that they really appreciated the question and answer format and also that it was to the point. So there wasn't fluff. It wasn't like blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that you don't need to know is very specific. So this is a charting book. You're planning to chart. What do you need to know? What resources do you need to be connected with? And what are some of the most common questions about charting? So it's really, like I said, just to the point and really specific. And actually, it was a lot of fun going through and answering the frequently asked questions and just kind of racking my brain for what would be the most approachable way to kind of talk about these things. So I know that you'll appreciate that aspect of it. So the initial pages of the book, it's not too long. It's just a handful of pages, something like 20 pages or something like that, but really taking you through some of those basics. I want to share with you some of the sections of the book. So in the book, there is a sample chart so that you can visualize how you could use it. And then I also go through each section of the chart. So there's the using the charting pages section, very practically titled, where I go through all of the different parts of the chart and then give you just, this is what you could say. Here's a suggestion of what you could put here. But what the common thread is that it's your charting book. And so here's a suggestion of how you can use it, but depending on what charting methodology you use, and also just your personal preferences, that will determine how you use the charting pages and what you put in there. So that's what I love. And I'm really excited to see images of how you have personalized your charts and how you've written in your data. And I'm sure we'll be sharing that in our Facebook group as time passes. So one of the features of the book that was really important to me was to have a place where you could actually summarize your charts. So I know when I first created the charting book, back in 2000 and whatever, way back when, I created summary pages. So they weren't as nice as the ones I have in this book, but I did create these summary pages so that I could just keep track of how many cycles I was having in a year, how long they were, just so that I had a sense. So back then it was really, really basic. So in this charting book, because I have 3 years of charts, I've included what I've called cycle summary pages. And so the cycle summary pages include an annual kind of overview where you can actually go in and put month to month, like, all the dates and if there's anything important, you can kind of write it in there. And I've also included cycle monitoring pages, which allow you to track your cycle number. So how many cycles you've charted, the dates. So, when your cycle started and ended, the total length of your cycle, the luteal phase length, and when ovulation happened approximately in your cycle. And so these cycle summary pages allow you to really look at just your trends. So at the end of your 3 years, if you use those pages, you would actually be able to see an overview of, how long your cycles were, when ovulation was about approximately taking place, how long your luteal phase was, how that kind of changed along the years. There's also a place for you to put the averages. So just having that data gives you a good sense of what your cycles are typically like, what some of the outliers look like, and all that kind of stuff. And I know for me, that is super helpful and important. So I know that you'll appreciate those pages in there. And then, of course, the charts. So the charts, it's really interesting, actually. I think the story is kind of funny of how the charts came about. I'm not a designer, in case you didn't know. That's not my area of expertise. But I do have a vision of what I want. Sometimes it's hard for me to put it into words. And so when I was looking for a designer to help me to create the charts, the first stop, I worked with a couple of people first before I found the guy, and it was actually a guy. It was a man that helped me to design the charts. Basically, what I was looking for, it was like, it's kind of like a spreadsheet, but I don't want it to look and feel like a spreadsheet, right? Because ultimately, it is a spreadsheet, but I didn't want it to feel like a spreadsheet. I wanted it to look beautiful. I wanted it to be functional. I wanted it to, because we want a nice paper chart to chart in. If we're making a charting book, we want it to look nice and feel nice. The first iteration, I went to one designer and I was like, I don't want it to feel like a spreadsheet, even though it is. And she was kind of like, it is a spreadsheet. And then she basically made me a spreadsheet. I was like, oh no, this isn't going to work. And so when I found the designer that I actually ended up working with, it was just a completely different experience. And we really worked hard to create a chart that was functional and lovely. So the books are printed in color. So when you get the paperback version, there's 3 versions and there's 2 editions. So the book I've created in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. So there is a Celsius edition and a Fahrenheit edition. And I did that because I knew that you would want to have the choice of either. When I was in the midst of creating everything and reaching out to my advanced reader team and all of those kind of interactions with everybody, and even with my clients, the first question was, is there a Celsius version? Yes, there is a Celsius version and a Fahrenheit version. The books are printed in color. I chose kind of like a pink theme, not an awful pink, kind of like a light pink. And yeah, so when I was designing them, it was important to have enough space, and it was important to have it to be functional. And also when you open the book, so that you have just room to do everything and everything's kind of laid out. And I also thought it would be nice to have everything on the same page. So each chart goes over 2 pages, and then you have your notes on the same page. Because I know in the charting workbooks I've done in the past, and even with it was always a little bit different, and maybe sometimes it was on the back side or whatever the case, but I wanted everything to just open it out, and then you have everything there and you can see it all. So for each cycle, you have everything in front of you, lots of space to write everything down. And so you'll see, I'm sure I've piqued your curiosity. So when you go to the thefifthvitalsign.com/charting workbook, then you'll see, and there's pictures of the interior and all the fun things. So that is what the final design was. It was a lot of fun, actually, with the process. I did end up having to actually draw out my vision and to kind of have the designer take that and run with it. So it was definitely an interesting process designing the charts and making sure that it kind of met all of my criteria. So you'll have to tell me what you think of the final product. I know there was a few of my early reviewers that weren't too happy that it went over 2 pages, but there were others that could kind of see the vision and understood why that took place. So of course, there's lots of different ways to organize it, and there's lots of different versions, and I'm sure that there will be different versions in the future. But yeah, I'm really excited to share the charts with you. So 36 charts, 3 years worth of charting pages, 3 years worth of cycle summaries pages. So I mentioned there's 3 versions. So there's an ebook version. The ebook version, when you purchase it, you will be provided with a link so you can actually print out pages individually if you want to and chart that way. There's the paperback version and the spiral bound version. And so with the spiral bound, it kind of, again, it's like a throwback to when I first created the book. But it was really important to me to create a spiral bound version because when I open it out, the spiral bound lays flat and you can kind of, organize a little bit better. So it's just easier to work with. And then the paperback so that you have both options. And then with the Celsius and the Fahrenheit, it was definitely a challenge to kind of get all the different manuscripts organized and everything together. But I'm really happy with the way it all turned out. And like I said, I'm really excited to hear what you think about it, what your thoughts are of it. And also I'm excited to see how you personalize your charts and how you kind of, how you put in all your information and run with it. Now, if you're experiencing a little bit of FOMO, because I mentioned that there was an advanced reader list and, there are women who were reading this book before it came out. If you're not yet on my email list, head over to fertilityfriday.com/freebies. I have a list of all the freebies that I have available at any current time on that page. And so you can actually go and opt into my 3-part video series. I have a 3-part series on fertility awareness. It's Intro to Fertility Awareness, or Fertility Awareness 101 is what I called it. And so basically it's an introduction to the 3 main fertile signs and some really great resources and suggestions for moving forward with your charting journey. You can also download the first chapter of the 5th vital sign for free. If you're not on my email list yet, then definitely jump on there because you never know what goodies are coming down the pipeline. And it's really my email list that gets the early advanced information, opportunities like this one to read the book before anyone else even got to see it or even know it was happening. So again, fertilityfriday.com/freebies. And now for you, so to grab your copy of the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook, you can head over to thefifthvitalsignbook.com/charting workbook. You can also just go straight to Amazon and search for Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook. And like I mentioned, it is available in 2 versions. It's available in Celsius and Fahrenheit. If you're in a different country and you're not seeing it on the Amazon for that country, you may have to actually go to Amazon.com and order it because the spiral bound version is not available in every single country, but it is available in the Amazon.com and the Amazon Canada store. Just so that you know, if you're looking and you only see the paperback or something like that, then that is why. And so I definitely want to hear from you, your thoughts on paper charting versus charting apps. I know some of you are in team charting apps and some of you are in team paper charts. I think we're all on the same team really, but I guess I'm trying to make a joke. But I will have a post in the Fertility Friday Facebook community. So if you're not in there already, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/community and join us in the Fertility Friday Facebook group. We'll be talking about charting apps, paper charting, and where you kind of fall in. And we'll also be talking about the charting workbook, what you think about it, what you think of the charts, and kind of just go from there. So if you're not part of the Facebook group already, make sure to join us in there. And also just a reminder that registration is now open for Fertility Awareness Mastery. So that's my 10-week fertility awareness group coaching program. And we are starting on October 1st, actually. So we're starting in a little bit over a month. But early bird registration closes on August 30th. So that's in just a couple of days if you're listening in real time. So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program for more information about joining us live in Fertility Awareness Mastery. If you register before August 30th, you'll have the opportunity to join us at the early bird rate. If you are listening to this in the future, just head over to the group program page and there'll be information there letting you know if there's still spaces available, if registration is still open, or if the group program for the next time is coming up in the future. And with that, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today, for taking some time out of your day to tune into the podcast. I appreciate all of you for tuning into the show, for supporting the show, for sharing the show with your friends. The incredible growth that Fertility Friday has seen is because of all of you. And I really appreciate all of you for helping to spread the word about fertility awareness. I really feel it. There's a movement happening. I've talked about this a lot. So some of you, you're very familiar with just this concept, but it really warms my heart to see how many women are learning about fertility awareness, I don't think it's yet mainstream, But I feel like we are moving towards a tipping point. I wouldn't say that it's mainstream just yet because your average woman still really doesn't know about it. But we're getting to the point where more and more women are learning about it. And I really think that as more, health professionals, doulas, midwives, nurses, doctors, naturopathic doctors, like as more health professionals become acquainted with fertility awareness, that is one of the ways to reach a lot of women because, of course, health professionals work with a lot of women. So all the different ways that this knowledge and information is getting into the hands of women, it just really warms my heart. And it's so nice to see that 20 years in to my journey, not only charting, but teaching women to chart and, being an educator and doing this work. It's really nice to see that there is change happening and that more women are learning about fertility awareness. And I really appreciate your role in helping to spread the word. So I appreciate all of you for sharing episodes. If you know someone who loves paper charting or who's been saying, man, I wish I had a really great paper chart. Why hasn't anyone made a really good paper chart? Then please share this episode. You'll find the show notes page for this episode over at fertilityfriday.com/274. And with that, I thank you once again for listening, for tuning into the show. To grab your copy of the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook, make sure to head over to thefifthvitalsignbook.com/charting workbook. And thank you once again. Have a wonderful weekend, whenever you're listening to the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.